At YVV, we are really spoiled for theological talent. And I should just say an extra special welcome to any who are here this morning for our theologian this morning who will be launching his book. Blessings on you. It's great to have you among us. And welcome to anyone who's with us for the first time today or back after travelling. Hope you're feeling at home with us and enjoying worshiping the Lord with us. Ben Chenoweth is one of our resident theologians and deep thinkers, and he has produced a new book, which I'm excited about because I've already read the Corinth letters by Ben, and I love the way Ben writes. If you've not read one of his books, I thoroughly recommend the experience to you because what you get when you read a Ben Chenoweth book is history, theology, New Testament history, but it all comes through story. And he has an amazing way of teaching truths through fiction, which is a fantastic gift. So there's nothing dry about a Ben Chenoweth book. The story absolutely pulls you through. And by the end of the book, you've got all these layers of other stuff that the book has gifted you with. Ben has a new book coming out, The Rome Gospel, and it has an endorsement from a New Testament professor at Denver Seminary by the name of Craig Blomberg, which is a name some of you will know. And he says this: Ben Chenoweth is a spellbinding storyteller. It will be hard for you to put the book down even once before you finish. Now that's an endorsement from a guy who's got books coming out of his ears. So from Craig Blomberg, that is high praise indeed. So let us give a rousing YVV welcome to author Ben Chenoweth.
Man, you've embarrassed me there. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak and officially launch this historical novel, The Rome Gospel. This is the third novel in a series that attempts to shed light on particular books in the New Testament. The first one, is it coming up? The first one was entitled The Ephesus Scroll, and that examined the historical context in which the book of Revelation was written and distributed. The second one was the Corinth letters, which looked at the church of Corinth and filled in the background of Paul's 2 letters to the Corinthians. Thank you. Both books have 2 timelines, one set in the 1st century and one in the present day, and the action jumps back and forth between the 2. And the reason for doing that was that I wanted to address 2 questions at the same time. What did those books mean for those who first received them? But then secondly, what do they mean for us today? Well, the third novel is a little different. This time the action takes place only in the 1st century, making this truly historical fiction. What hasn't changed though is that I'm still trying to explain the background of a New Testament book. Well, this one looks at the Gospel of Mark and then brings in selected portions of the book of Acts as a bonus. Most scholars believe that the Gospel of Mark was the first Gospel to be written. But what led Mark to write it? And how did he construct his Gospel? And who was it written for? These are the sort of questions that scholars ask. The trouble is, answers are a little bit elusive. We know that between the time of Jesus and the writing of the Gospels, the stories of Jesus were shared orally. And this oral history was shared from person to person in the early church. And this is the material that Mark would have used. But was this oral history made up of hundreds of fragmentary, unconnected stories about Jesus, all mixed up with little bits of his teaching that Mark then had to construct, put together? Or did this oral history come to have a distinct shape? Well, my personal opinion is that it would have had a distinct shape. That when people were telling the account of Jesus, they started with John the Baptist and Jesus' baptism. They followed that with selected highlights of Jesus' ministry and teaching before describing in greater detail the passion and the resurrection. and then finishing with the commissioning of the apostles. So when Mark came to write his gospel, he simply followed the structure of the oral history. Well, where did he get this oral history from? He would have got it from someone who could recite the account of Jesus from memory. And this is probably what Luke was referring to when he mentions servants of the word in Luke chapter 1. And so the process of Mark writing his gospel is what I've envisaged in my novel. You can't read the back there, but let me just quickly go through the blurb. Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, is dead, executed by order of the Emperor Nero himself. Then news of the Apostle Peter's arrest spreads through the scattered and persecuted Christian community of Rome like wildfire. When the news reaches Johanan, also known as Mark, he decides the time has come for him to leave. However, before he can board the ship to Cyrene, the city of his birth, he receives a divine call to become a servant of the word, someone who can retell the account of Jesus the Messiah. In order to do so, he will need to spend time with one of the last eyewitnesses still living in Rome, a woman named Junia. The process will be a lengthy one, and the danger of arrest for both of them is a daily risk. But Mark is unprepared for the memories that are stirred up. Memories of his childhood, the failures and successes of his adult life, but most importantly, the memories of a horrible, dark night many years ago in Jerusalem. Alright, so while the novel is set in the 1st century, there is still some jumping back and forth. I was talking to someone earlier. I don't let my readers rest. You have to think a little bit as you read. Because Mark has a number of flashbacks, which is hinted at in the blurb. Mark is a very interesting character. He actually has a lot of connections to the early church. We know from the book of Acts that when Peter is miraculously freed from prison, he goes to Mark's mother's house, and where they're having a prayer meeting. And while Acts does not explicitly confirm this, Mark's mother's house is also quite possibly the place where the Holy Spirit fell on the day of Pentecost and the place where Jesus celebrated the Last Supper. And of course, we know that Mark went with Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey, and he was the reason that Paul and Barnabas had their big argument and went their separate ways. So the character of Mark is a fascinating one, and it was a lot of fun thinking about certain events in Acts from his perspective. All right, well, I hope that I have piqued your curiosity enough that you want to buy a copy. Let me go through, we've already heard the endorsements, so that was cool, thanks for that. There's a couple more too by other people in the front of the book. I've got a book table up the back, and I've got lots of copies. The paperbacks cost $15 each. I have copies of the first 2 books in the series. Now, I should say you don't have to read them in order. They do work on their own, but there are some connections between the books. So if you care about such things, start with the Ephesus Scroll and learn all about Revelation. And for those of you that like to read on a Kindle or an ebook device, I do have ebooks available, and there's a little flyer, little one there, that you can take away and it will help you find it. But basically, if you if you search on your device for Ben Chenoweth, you should be able to find my books. They're pretty much there. And the ebooks are cheaper. They're only $5 each. And the first book is free. Just the ebook though. Just the ebook is free. All right, thanks again. I officially announce the Rome Gospel is released.